All right. Well, we're back here with part two of our interview with author Mark Redmond, aka my dad, and want to dive in a little bit now to the actual books and the stories that that you're telling with your writing, and probably the one you're most known for. You talked about already. The Adventure of Artie Anderson, that whole series of 6 books. So what have you been writing since that series came to an end? And what are some of the projects that maybe are coming up? So let's just start with what have you written after the Artie series that maybe some people might not know about yet?
Well, yes, some other people who are listening to this know I taught in the same school for 28 years, and I wrote all but the last one of the Artie books. I wrote the first 5 while I was teaching there, and I had book signings and stuff at school, and occasionally the parents got together and would good-naturedly hassle me and say, "Hey, enough of the kids' books. When are you going to write something for us?" So I put together a book of short stories called Five for the Trail that has a half a dozen Western stories in it. And that's geared more toward more mature readers, or although younger, high school kids could read it too. There's nothing objectionable in any of my books because my life centers around my faith in God. And because of that, my writing shows that, and I'm not preachy. I don't try to. I'm not writing sermons. I'm writing stories. And in the first video, Ben was talking about how there's some humor. People, although times have changed and clothing has changed and medical issues have changed, all kinds of things have changed. People's nature hasn't. And no matter when they lived or when they live in the future, kids are going to be funny. They can't help it. I mean, if you're around kids, you're going to be laughing. If you're not, then something's wrong with you, not them. But basically, I wrote that book of short stories and put that together, and then I went after I started a series for grown-ups that's, and again, a teenager, a young adult could read it, and there wouldn't be any harm in it. But it's a bounty hunter series. In fact, this is the first one in the series. It's bounty hunter Nate Landry, Major Issues. And the second one is Bounty Hunter Nate Landry, Family Fury. I'm working on the third one. I just started it. But in the meantime, while I was working on getting these 2 published, I wrote the first book in another middle grade series, this time set in Arizona, since I'm in Arizona, and it's a lot easier to check out the things that I'm writing about. It involves a family of 5 children instead of just one, like the Artie Anderson series. And I mean, Artie had friends and everything, but he was the only child in the family. But in this story, set in the same time period, post-Civil War, Arizona, and there are 5 children, 2 girls and 3 boys. And in the opening chapter, the oldest girl, who's the narrator for the story, goes out to the stable early in the morning to do her chores and finds her father dead. Her mother had died 2 years earlier, and so now they're orphans. And she's the oldest at 15. She has a brother who's 14, another sister who's 12, and then the youngest 2 boys are 10 and 8. And their biggest fear, in fact, it's pretty much a certainty, as soon as somebody finds out that both their parents had passed away. Pretty much people were aware that their mom died, but when they find out that her father's dead, they're convinced that the sheriff will come and take them to an orphanage in Tucson. And they're terrified that they do not want to go to the orphanage. They want to stay on the ranch. So their goal is, and Ruth, the oldest girl, figures out the goal is not to keep. They can't really keep their father. I mean, he's gone. There's nothing they can do about that. All they have to do is not let anybody know that he's gone. And so the book centers around they're trying to keep secret the fact that their father's dead and they're running the ranch by themselves. And they've been running it by themselves because their father, after they lost their mom, their father didn't do very well with that, and he kind of gave up. So he hadn't been doing a whole lot, hadn't been contributing very much, and they had been running the ranch. So now they have to make sure that anybody who stops by, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, but people still come by occasionally. They have to make sure that nobody finds out that their father's dead. And for the older three kids, that's not too much of a problem. But for an 8-year-old boy and a 10-year-old boy, trying to keep that quiet is a chore, and it gets pretty interesting with them trying to keep their secret. Also, coming up for me, hopefully in 2022, I'm going to begin working on audiobooks. The books I have so far are available in ebook and paperback, but I'm going to do some audiobooks, and I'll narrate those myself. I have the equipment that's necessary, and I am really excited about that because audiobooks are growing in popularity more and more. And I have, on a number of occasions, read a chapter or two of my books to kids. One time was around a campfire. That was kind of fun. Another time was in a school in Michigan, where the principal had been reading a chapter at a time each week to the kids. And when he got to the last chapter, they had all this planned. He pretended that he had a sore throat, and he said, "Boy, I don't know. I don't think I can finish this book." And the kids were all bummed out, trying to find somebody else to read it for him. And he said, "Wait a minute, I know who can read it. There's got to be somebody here." And I walked in, dressed like this, and I read the last chapter to him. That was so much fun.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think the audiobooks will be great. I'm a big audiobook guy. I love the ones read by the authors. And my whole life, I've been trying to figure out a way to put you on 1.5 speed when you're talking. So that's what gives me a great opportunity to do it if I can get those. But
get it over with.
Right. I think the question that I have, which is a little bit jumping ahead of ourselves, where we want to go in the last segment of this, but I have to imagine other people are listening to this and listening to you talk about this in-depth story about these 5 kids. And then the third book in this other series about Nate Landry, the bounty hunter. And I'm thinking to myself, where in the world are you coming up with this stuff? Where did these stories come from? Are you just sitting at home or walking around one day and all of a sudden you think about 5 kids? I mean, how does that work for you?
That's a difficult question to answer. Well, I guess the question isn't difficult. The answer is difficult to make people understand. Back when I was writing the R.D. Anderson series, that most of that series was written on Saturday mornings because that was the only time I had when I could write. I've always been better at writing in the morning because I'm much more alert than the afternoon. My brain fog takes over and I don't do as well. But there were times when somebody asks me about writer's block, I've never had writer's block in my entire life. And sometimes the biggest problem for me is, like, when I first created Artie Anderson, he was based on you. You were 11, he was 11. And when I wrote, I saw him in my head. But then you grew up and he stayed basically the same age, or grew up very much more slowly through the books that followed. Um, and some days, I mean, these characters, and it's still this way. This book I just finished, which, by the way, will be out in January. As far as I know, I'm waiting on the people who are designing the cover for me. They've sent the rough draft, and I made some corrections and sent it back to them. So I'm hoping within a week or so to have the second draft of the cover, which may be the final draft. But that book is was the same way in writing it. This is going to scare some of you probably. It sounds kind of freaky, but those characters take off on their own, and it's all I can do to write fast enough to write down what they're doing. And it's always been that way for me. Once I create, it's almost like a little wind-up toy that we used to have. You just wind it up, and it just takes off on its own. I don't know, when I start writing a book, I don't know how it's going to end. I may have some idea. And the one Artie Anderson book, Artie and the Texas Ranger, which is a mystery, that one I had to think ahead a little bit and plan ahead to make sure clues added up to the solution and they made sense and so forth. But the rest of them, basically, I just follow along and write down what they're doing.
Man, that's so interesting to hear about that creative process. So, like, for a character like Nate Landry, who's the hero of your adult series there, did he come from anywhere? Do you remember do you remember the first time when you had a picture in your head of what this guy looked like, or the first time the name Nate Landry popped into your head?
Well, the conversations that Nate and Wolf, his best friend, have when I write about them, I can see Spencer and Hawk from the series that Robert Urich starred in. It's the same kind of rapport they have because they're such good friends. And sometimes what they say is absolutely outrageous. And they say, when they're talking to somebody else even, they say it with a smile. And it's not what people are expecting. And I've always loved doing that. Tom Selleck did that in some of his movies. I remember him smiling at a character saying, "I can't make myself care about that." And there's something about